Hi, this is the second of 3 videos on a little series of basic Learn to Knit instructions. So in the first one I showed you 2 ways of casting on, and in this one I'm going to show you how to knit a stitch and how to purl a stitch. But first of all, let's just look at this, because on this little sample of knitting here I have knitted in 2 different ways. You can see how the textures look different. So this bottom section here is called garter stitch, and to work garter stitch you simply knit every stitch whether you're working a right side row or a wrong side row, and it basically looks virtually identical on both sides. This is the right side. I know that because I cast on with my thumb and I've got the tail here on the right at the beginning of this row. So that's the right side of garter stitch and that's the wrong side of garter stitch, and it looks really similar. So you knit every stitch on every row to get that, and it's a really nice stitch because it's probably the first stitch most people do, and it also lies completely flat. This section above it is stocking stitch, and this is more conventional. This is the kind of knitting you see on a jumper that you might buy usually. So you can see on this side, which is the right side, we've got smooth stitches lying in these vertical lines. And on the back, it looks a little bit like the garter stitch, but this is reverse stocking stitch, so it's much closer together. And to get stocking stitch, you knit on the right side of your work, and then when you turn it round and knit the next row, you purl. So first of all, I'm going to teach you how to knit stitches in order to make this garter stitch. So I've got 12 live stitches here. I'm going to put the right hand needle into that first stitch. You're going straight into that hole there, and then just gently tighten that up, and I'm going to take the working yarn in my right hand, and it's going to go underneath and round the right hand needle, which is underneath the left hand needle, and then it comes between the 2 needles like that, and then I pull this right hand needle tip back and I knit that straight off. So that's 1 stitch knitted. Let's do that again. Into the next stitch with the right hand needle, straight into the hole, not behind it like we did for some of the casting on, but just into the stitch. And then take the working yarn around and underneath that needle tip, the right hand tip, in between the 2 needles, and then you pull this needle back towards you and you slip that stitch off the end of the left hand needle. So I've now knitted 2 stitches. One more time slowly. Into the stitch, around the right hand needle tip, and then the yarn is in between the 2 needles. Pull the right hand needle tip back and just push that stitch off the left hand needle. So now I've got 3 stitches. So now I'm just going to slowly, so you can just watch how it works, knit to the end of this row. So far all I'm doing is just knitting, and if I knitted every stitch on all rows, I'd end up with another section of garter stitch like you see at the bottom of this sample. So now I've knitted to the end, I've added another row of stitches. So now I'm going to turn my work round so I've got the wrong side facing towards me, and I'm going to show you how to purl. So it's very similar, it's basically just backwards. You take the right hand needle tip, and instead of going in like that to knit, which we did before, you're actually going to take it this way, so it's going from right to left, but it still goes into the stitch. So you pop that right hand needle into the stitch from right to left. Take hold of the working yarn, and you take the working yarn around the right hand needle, which is now lying on top of the left hand needle. So it goes behind the needle tip and round to the front, and then you pull that needle back and take the stitch off, and that's a purl stitch. So let's do that again. The yarn is at the front instead of being at the back as it would be when you were knitting. You put the needle tip, the right hand needle tip, into the next stitch on the left hand needle. Take the working yarn behind the right hand needle tip and round it, and then pull that right hand needle back and let that stitch go off the needle, off the left-hand needle. So one more time slowly. You go from right to left, from front to back really, into that stitch. Take the yarn round the right-hand needle, back towards you, then pull that needle through and just pop that stitch off the end. So now I'm just going to slowly purl to the end of this row so you can see how that purling will work for you once you've had a couple of goes at this and you've got your eye in. It will feel fiddly at the beginning, but I suggest you just practice casting on and then knitting and purling. So now I've added 2 more rows of stocking stitch.